Draft science video. Been a little while. Missed our, all too often physics lessons, but uh, stuff happens and shit goes on and all that kind of crap. So yes, been a little busy. But there are a couple of comments I wanted to get to, and there's a new snarky one, and that's always provocative. Um, you know, the arguments, as stated, are thin, weak, and unresponsive to both the specifics, the detail, the quality of the arguments I'm making. And that's just the truth. There's no quality to these arguments. They're simpleton reflexes. They're knee jerks. They're not anything that could be qualified as decisive or encompassing or complete or of sufficient strength to even be paid attention to. So anyway, some Jacob McCatrin, who's going to get blocked because again just can't handle the obligations of civil discourse, which is you just can't be a completely rude shithead. And that's true in all the credible places in civilization. You just can't walk into any old building and be a rude fuck without getting escorted to the door. And you know that. But because YouTube allows you to be an asshole, you're an asshole. Fine. I don't have to let you be one. So not only will I instruct you in physics, but I will instruct you in basic manners and tell you, homie, don't play that. Yeah, any homie with any self-respect don't play it. You fucking piece of shit. Anyway, so this comment wasn't too rude, but the other ones were. So when I'm done, I'll appropriately respond. Cosmic background radiation doesn't impose force. Well, that's what's under dispute, idiot. You are an idiot. You say so, because you've tasted it. You went up to the cosmic background radiation place, and you licked it and said, nope, no force there. No, you didn't. Obviously, the force under dispute is one that cannot be detected, idiot, beyond its actions. That's how much of gravity we can see. That's the same amount that Einstein has proof of, by the way, jackass. Your bent space is not testable any other way than that. Jerk. It's an invisible force. I don't know if you don't understand that. Like a photon. You can't see it till it hits something. I don't know, maybe you're ignorant of that fact, but a photon's never been detected till it hits something. Square in the face. That's how it has to happen, shithead. Can't detect it any other way, dumbass. Alright, and is very weak and continually getting weaker. So this and continually getting weaker thing. So you're saying in the 40 years or 50 years since they detected this thing, that somehow they've detected it's getting steadily weaker? I don't think that's true. I think that's just absolute nonsense. It just coincidentally we get to see it before it weakens to nothing? I don't think so. Yeah, your particles are perpetually coming from every direction. Well, perpetually in the same sense as the cosmic background radiation was probably still there 200 million years ago, and it's there now, and it'll be there 250 million years from now. So it seems like it's a perpetual source by your definition. So the cosmic background radiation is perpetual energy. Is that your argument? Just as perpetual as any other theoretical source of something. No. Anyway, your particles are perpetually coming from every direction. Well, guess what? The cosmic background radiation is essentially coming from every direction and cause massive amounts of force. Well, again, massive amounts of an invisible force. That's right. Yes. That is totally consistent and also completely undetected. Again, undetected in the sense that we're detecting it. It's definitely a force and it's definitely here. No doubt about it. So again, undetected means if you can't detect it, it doesn't exist. Okay, so then Einstein's meant space is undetected, therefore it doesn't exist. I mean, it's a absolutely useless comment. Your particles are perpetually coming from every direction and cause massive amounts of force. Yes, that's what gravity is, massive amounts of force. Your bent space is coming from nowhere and causing massive amounts of force, essentially. Yes, any explanation of gravity is going to basically say what's happening is happening for a reason, and clearly the reason is invisible, or we would already blamed it on the angels or the fairies if we had pictures of them. The whole point of the argument is to describe accurately what the real cause is. And the whole point of bringing up the cosmic background radiation was merely because you people can't accept the existence of something without an explanation of its source. So I gave you one example of a possible source. I said the location that the cosmic background radiation is coming from. You couldn't even pay attention to that detail. I didn't say the cosmic background radiation was gravity. Okay, so its weakness is irrelevant. It's at a frequency, by the way. The gravity isn't. Gravity isn't a photon in the sense of at a frequency. That's the whole point. The point is that you wanted a location. Where's it coming from? Well, I said it's coming from the same place the cosmic background radiation is coming from. So you're not talking about where the cosmic background radiation is coming from and how that location cannot possibly create gravity. Did you? You didn't do that. And so he says, again, no comparison. No, again, that's a silly thing to say, because obviously you didn't answer the question. Obviously, how is it no comparison? You want a source of radiation. I point to a source of radiation and say, it's just like that source of radiation. How is it different? How is that not possible? Did you explain that? No. So, useless mush. Okay. Alright, so another guy asked kind of a weird question. I don't know, maybe I should get to the snarky ones first, but I'll just do them in the order of their presentation here. Well, maybe I'll do them now. Yeah, just get the Jacob guy over with. Alright, so Superior Mind said what I thought was a pretty rational, simple, light comment. He quoted me saying, "'Cause my mommy says so," because I was making a joke about that's their only source of information. And he says, "LOL, yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. Like you pointed out, arguments are one thing, but zealous, regurgitated assertions are useless." So, perfectly sensible comment. Now, James McGinn, who is supposed to be an evolutionary expert, somehow couldn't understand that simple comment and says to Superior Mind, "Maybe you can clarify who this comment was directed at." Well, clearly it wasn't directed at me in the sense of he wasn't telling me anything. He was just agreeing with me and saying, yeah, basically that's it. They're just citing their mummy experiments. It's pretty obvious. It appears to be directed at draft science, but I suspect otherwise. Well, again, I just don't think that even needs clarification. So anyway, so the Jacob guy chimes in, says, "The hypocrisy is truly astounding. You in a nutshell, Daddy Mendham said so." So again, nothing about my videos or the presentation of my arguments or anything. I'm not sitting there like Ken Wheeler going, the smaller it is, the bigger its capacitance. Making declaration. It's a hyperboloid. I'm not doing any of that. I'm giving you a thing, a mechanical drawing, going all the way from the simplest action to the more complex actions, and explaining to you how the simple actions lead to the complex actions, and diagramming every little bit of it almost. I mean, beyond the saying what exactly the polarization is, the identity difference between the A-atons and B-atons, in the sense that the two of them are filtered, the positive and negative poles of a magnet, beyond giving you exactly why the two are different, I've given you a hell of a lot. There's no declarations being made by me. I'm not saying Gary says so ever here. Ever. I mean, it's an outrageous claim to make. There's not a single thing I'm not willing to explain. Except I can't explain, once you get down to checkerboard, yeah, I can't explain it any further. Yeah, that's right. It's a checkerboard, black and red spaces, and there's checkers, the black and red, and the black checkers stay on the black, and the red checkers stay on the red. Yeah, besides making it that fucking simple, I can't help you. Yes, I can't explain that because no one will ever explain that. No one's going to explain the origin of the universe, retard, ever. Man. LOL, yeah. Yeah, like, again, just a completely insane description of the over 400 videos on this channel, detailing everything. Okay, except Daddy in Mendham has no evidence. Well, again, I don't need evidence. All I have to do is make theories that are consistent with the existing evidence. The people who don't have evidence or strong evidence is you. You have the magic claims, the imaginary bent thing does stuff, the imaginary dark thing does stuff, the imaginary virtual photons from nowhere do stuff. Where's your evidence? Oh, that's right, your evidence is in the outcomes. The same thing my theory is consistent with. Wow, amazing. So he says no in capital letters as if there's no evidence when, no, my theory unifies physics, which your theories don't do, and is consistent with the evidence. Explains why there is an inverse square law. Unlike you idiots who just say, there's the law. My theory explains the law. It explains why things stay in motion. It explains Newton's laws. Where do you explain any of that? Oh, that's right. No comment. I don't know what inertia. I don't know. I have no idea. Alright, the theory doesn't align with real-world observations. Like which one? Which real-world observation isn't it aligned with? So another vague notion that you have some sort of argument that you haven't presented any evidence of or haven't accounted for at all. Source. Where's your source? It hasn't made a single accurate prediction. Well, it's predicting you're not going to have gravitational lensing. That your weak evidence of gravitational lensing is indication that, oh yeah, that's right, that doesn't happen. Forces don't move forces. So that's not going to work. And has no mathematical framework. Oh, except for all the good math, it's perfectly fine. The inverse square law, for example, and all of the Maxwell's equations. There's plenty of mathematical framework that it's perfectly consistent with. To confirm it or even make predictions in the first place. Well, again, it does make predictions. The prediction is going to be that there's going to be an explanation for the two-slit experiment, and maybe very soon. Okay, that's not going to have anything to do with magical photons. And it's going to have something to do with the structure of matter and electrons. So, go ahead. I mean, you say so. There's not a piece of evidence here. What experiment demonstrates my theory to be wrong? Show me one. Just one. Show me one. And I'll show how it's weak and it doesn't demonstrate anything. Alright, so James says to the jerk, the evidence is in the public domain. It is available to anybody. Gary's theory is not inconsistent with anything but your imagination. Well, it's not, yeah, well, it's inconsistent with his imagination, but it's also inconsistent with his delusionary extrapolations of what he thinks the evidence demonstrates. And your own words demonstrate as much. Close enough. Alright, so Jacob says, let's see the evidence. Well, again, what evidence do you want to see? Name an experiment, and I'll say, yes, my theory is consistent with that. Let's see it confirm predictions to 0.00001% and further accuracy like current accepted models. Current accepted models of what? You mean currently accepted mathematics that is merely a formula that puts in variables. Variables that aren't defined about what their source is. The inverse square law doesn't indicate bent space any more than it indicates anything else that would create the same thing. So how exactly does being consistent with the math prove anything. You're saying, at 1 minute you're saying it's that something doesn't meet it, therefore it's disqualified, but in the next minute you're saying that anything that meets it is qualified. You can't say it both ways. As it's clearly stated, you're the one who has to point out where it is inconsistent. I don't have any obligation to sit there and say, well, yes, I could have made the same prediction because I totally agree with the variables that went into the equation. Idiot. You just don't understand what theoretical physics is. Alright, let's see the mathematical framework that makes these predictions. So again, so he says the math is the same thing. He thinks bent space created the inverse square law. He doesn't understand that, no, bent space was invented to conform to the inverse square law. It didn't make it. It was a byproduct of it. Dopey. It is inconsistent with gravitational lensing. Well, yes, then that's under dispute right now. That's one of the subjects. I will concede that it is not catastrophically inconsistent in the sense that I haven't written any law that says all the forces will never interact with any force. It's not possible. I'm just saying, generally speaking, we know all the forces don't interact, so there'd be very little reason for photons, which are supposed to be electromagnetic, and yet you can't fuck them up with electricity or magnetism, and yet you can fuck them up with gravity. There's an inconsistency there in your own, by any just kind of plain logic. And your evidence is incredibly weak, and now you're saying this is your proof of gravitational lensing is so strong that you can say your entire theory is based on it? So can we concede that if gravitational lensing is proven to be, whoops, we made a mistake there, that I can throw out your entire belief system? But somehow you think that's important? Okay. The double slit experiment, which I've already, like I said, I can only demonstrate the fact that the math doesn't even have the width of the slits in it. So how am I being inconsistent? And it relies on a Huygens theory that has, that's as loop-de-doo as it gets, in the sense that there's an infinite number of little things inside of a confined space, which violates most all of physics. Quarks and many other subatomic particles that have been detected. Well, again, some of these subatomic particles aren't really subatomic particles. They're empty spaces in a particle field. So you're not even getting that part right. And the fact that they're particles, called particles, is inconsistent with your own theory. Funny person. Where'd they come from? That have been detected, redshift time dilation. So again, I've already been over time dilation, which is time retardation, which is metabolism retardation. It doesn't have anything to do with time being dilated. So again, I have no obligation to have you pretend that I haven't made over 400 videos and that I haven't been over these subjects, and you can't claim I haven't answered these points when I already have. So it's unacceptable. I have a message board where there's videos. I have anybody who gives a damn, these have already been addressed. And I don't have any obligation to accept you saying they haven't, or implying they haven't, when I have addressed all of these subjects. So he says gravitational waves, which again I've addressed over and over again. Whatever. Light deflection. How does that prove bent space? The precession of Mercury he's going to bring up. I've already been over this. Even a lot of scientists will debate over the fact that there's not even any relativity in Einstein's field equations regarding the precession of Mercury, because all he's really doing is having the sun's center of gravity move. It precesses. The sun's precession of its center of gravity is what Mercury is duplicating, idiot. Fool. That's why it affects Mercury so much more than the other planets, is because obviously the further you get away from something that's moving, the less you can see its movement. But that's physics, and you wouldn't understand that. Anyway. And many other things. Well, just another vacuous statement of the promised evidence that we'll never see. Denying evidence is going to get you nowhere. Well, again, I haven't done that. That's a obnoxious thing to say. There's no evidence I have denied. What I have done is pointed out the huge flaws in your evidence, the gigantic gaps, the fact that your evidence absolutely sucks in some cases. It sucks so bad that you invent fake things like dark matter to fix it. Yeah, exactly. Until you can come up with what is required to conform a theory, especially to the level of certainty you people are conveying, don't bother responding. Fuck you. Don't bother ever commenting. You know, I mean, if that's your attitude, jackass. Because what did Einstein put up as evidence? Besides merely trying to conform his theory to the existing evidence. What was his evidence, asshole? He got on the cover of the he got on the headlines in the New York Times based on an experiment that the guy who did it, who was also a huge Einstein fan, right, not exactly an unprejudiced fellow, wrote in his own notes, "I wouldn't stake my lives on these results." And yet you still think that's strong evidence. So much so you'll insult people in defense of your strong evidence. I mean, you know, you're just such a fucking rude, obnoxious asshole. And I'm glad that you've announced who you are. You've put your name up here. This is for posterity, so to speak. So you'll be known for who you are. A shit talker. And not very smart, not very logical. And you have absolutely zero intellectual integrity, because you know I have discussed these subjects. You know, I've gone over it and over it. You liar. Alright, so now James chimes in again. See how this one goes. I don't know what the cat is doing. It's being putsy. Where the hell we go? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's been cold here, so it's been coming in at night. Yeah. Yeah, old people and old cats are a pain in the ass. Anyway, now you're just making shit up. Yes, good point, James. Are you getting emotional because you believe current theory achieves an ideal that actually only exists in your imagination? If you have a specific challenge, I encourage you present it. But that's not going to happen. I'd say it's because the absurdity of your claims indicates that you don't really even understand the theory you are defending. I think your efforts would be better spent attempting to find a test that can distinguish between the respective hypotheses. But I know from my own experience that this standard scientific protocol won't be something that a true believer like yourself would be interested in pursuing. And unfortunately, obviously, this stuff was debated hundreds of years ago, and it's not easy to find simple tests. Clearly, the Hubble telescope could look next to the sun and solve all of this bullshit, but no, it doesn't want to bother doing that. As is the case with the vast majority, you lack the intellectual muscle that might allow you to distinguish between what you understand and what you only believe. Well, it's worse than that, you know, it's just the whole religious thing, you know. People who don't even read the Bible are fanatics, you know. It's just a pitiful human trait to be an ignorant, arrogant asshole. It's just something, it's like orangutans drinking their own piss. It's just something humans are good at. I think I'm going to be waiting a long, long time. You're going to be waiting for what? Stupid fuck. Alright, so anyway, we'll just get rid of this asshole. Totally useless puke. Anyway. So this Luke Allen guy did ask me this shit. He wrote a tremendously wordy comment and asked some questions in there. What is it that you want, Cat? Yeah, I'm not your personal servant and all that shit. If you're not tired, go outside. Yeah, I'll see what he does. Thanks for, so yeah, first he posted below, blah, blah, okay. Alright, so some stuff, oh my, okay. Do you think time can be manipulated or changed in any way by anything? No, time's a function. You do it, you use it up. So it's pouring water, I don't know how to, you use it up. Once it's used, it's used. It's done. Can't use it again. Okay, it's you can't reuse a function like that. I mean, you can't you can't explode and then unexplode and then explode again, kind of a thing. You just can't undo it. Yeah, it's not undoable. Okay, is it inert? Or is it inert? Like volume is inert? I don't even know. Sorry, that doesn't mean anything to me. But regardless, it's a function. You use it up. You can't go backwards. Can't reverse it. In other words, are the following concepts theoretically possible? Time travel. No. Well, you can time travel in one sense. You can go forward in time if you go to sleep. So it's like the time dilation thing. The more asleep you go, the further into the future you can get. So if I just cut all your frame rate down real slow and you're only living 1 minute a day, well then yes, you can live more days much further into the future. But you can't really travel there. You have to wait for it. So you have to do the, whatever the guy who fell asleep for 20 years was. Well, I can't remember anything anymore. You know, the old references, you have to really search for them. Anyway, old geezer guy, whatever the old fable is. Anyway, you have to do that shit. You have to go to sleep and wake up in the future. Time deceleration. Well, time doesn't accelerate or decelerate, so it just doesn't matter. Time acceleration, no. Time is not a dimension. It's not a place. It's not a thing you can manipulate. It's just a function. And it's what matter does when it travels distance. And traveling distance without some source of energy can't be undone. Even with a source of energy, you can't undo it. You can just redo it in the opposite direction, but you can't undo it. I think you already hinted at your stance in the last video, but I wanted to make sure I understand your position. Yes, time is, I don't know how to describe what's like time in the sense of something you use up. But it's like distance. You can't just undo it. You have to redo it. And redoing it ain't the same as undoing it, if that's a way to put it. Going from here to there is not the same as just doing from there to here. They're two different events. Okay. Do you think space can ever be entirely empty? I think nothing is an impossible thing to completely conceive, because as soon as you identify it as something by calling it nothing, you've made it something, and it makes it messy. So, yes, I think nothing can be, just that it's not in the way we mechanically order the world. We end up putting nothing in a category, and as soon as you do that, you've made nothing something. And so it's very hard for us to contemplate nothing without making it into something. So our model gives nothing too much reality for us to appreciate what nothing is. So it's, in a way, I'm saying we can't conceive of nothing properly, therefore we can't imagine it properly. Alright, yeah, good enough. Entirely empty, or does it always contain some amount of substance or things besides volume? Well, this volume thing I got no use for, so I don't know where you're going with that silly word. I mean, the amount of substance of a thing besides volume. I don't, substance, and then there's volume. No, there's things and they can take up so much space, but that's about it. Things have size. I just don't know where you're going with that. Or does it always contain some amount of substance or thing besides volume. I don't know what that means, but I think the universe doesn't have to be any kind of infinite thing. In other words, in a finite volume, it is possible that any region has nothing in it at all. I'm just saying the space is pretty empty, and I'm saying the bits, the smallest bits, I don't think they have other bits. I don't think there's anything deeper. So the space between, say, two photons or something is empty space. It's not full of some kind of volume. Do you think space, volume, he puts in parentheses, space is not volume. I mean, I'm just saying there's no point in having a conversation about, well, do you think, why don't you just start off with, do you think space is qualified as something that's nothing? Or do you think space is something? But I never agreed that space was a something. So you saying space is volume is presumptuous, because I don't see the point of using the word space to describe something. Do you think space is infinite or finite? I don't think about it. But I would think if there was nothing, yes, nothing could be infinite. Yes. In the context of the entire universe, whatever the entire universe would be. Who knows? If it's a big bang, then it's a bubble in a field of nothing, something like that. But if there's no big bang, yes, then maybe it's a lot bigger than what we appreciate. I don't know. But infinite just doesn't go anywhere, in my opinion, as a thought. So I just don't think it can work that way. The error is confined, I think. But I don't know. I don't know if it makes any goddamn difference, is what I really want to say. What's the difference? Do you think substance is infinite or finite? Substance is infinite or finite? I mean, obviously the individual substances are quite finite. So again, just another way of saying the same thing. Do you think the infinite universe is infinite? I don't know. What the hell does that have to do with this theory? Nothing. Do you think force is infinite or finite? Here we go again. The context of the entire universe. The entire universe defined by what? Why are these questions important to people? I really just don't understand why. You got a universe that is absolutely insanely huge. The part of what we've seen. If it's 10 times that size, who cares? If it's 1,000,000 times that size, who cares? It's a gazillion, zillion, trillion, trillion, zillion, 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 zillion times that size, who cares? Because it's totally inaccessible. It doesn't mean anything. Can't have any relevance or meaning. I don't know. Do you think the effect of gravity is tied to a gravitational field? Do you think the effect of gravity is tied to a gravitational field? Finite range of influence. I've already explained it in detail. I don't even understand why you would ask this question. Where did you cut and paste this or something? Or does it have an infinite range of influence? There's gravity where there's pressure. If there's no pressure, there's no gravity. Yeah, the time pressure. Do you think the effects of gravity is one-way effect somehow, or both objects feel the effect? Well, this is already kind of demonstrated by Einstein's math. That's the whole point of the mathematical upgrade, is kind of breaking the old Newton notion of M1 and M2, because it's accepting the idea that the Earth creates as much movement as the Earth has towards the Sun is moving towards the Earth. As much mass. The mass of the two movements is equal. So it's just that the Sun is so big, that little tiny bit of movement that caused by it is me going like that on my shirt. Doesn't mean much to the Sun, where it means a lot to the Earth because of its size. Alright. In your analogy of us being in a small portion of the smoke ring, and the actual universe consisting of the entire smoke ring, it made me think of the thought experiment, which could just be like your frog smoking a cigar or not. What if the ether, which I visualize as a kind of zero viscosity liquid that has one-way attraction to greater density of itself, so it's just an endless fluid. I don't see how that's an improvement, but whatever. Somehow generates matter at some finite central region of the universe. Let's use the center of a basketball as a visual representation, and then as new matter is generated, it is being pushed outward in all directions. And where we are in the universe would represent something like being an atom on the skin of the basketball. Fine, I'm just saying we can't see far enough to know if there is a lack of symmetry somewhere, because where we are is too symmetrical. But yes, there could be part of a greater imbalance that we are part of, that's only balanced by a much bigger perspective. But I just can't see all this investment of interest in that question. I mean, these other parts of physics are so much more interesting, in my opinion, than speculating about stuff that I don't think we're ever going to answer. Far from the center, but there are still much farther we can go outward infinitely. And I don't think you can, because, maybe by your fluid idea, because you have an endless supply of this fluid, but I would argue the gravity would dissipate and therefore the matter would disintegrate, represented by the space outside the skin of the basketball. This would be never-ending type of Big Bang. Well, again, I would argue that that space it creates between things is going to create a lowering of the density of the pressure, and the pressure is necessary to hold the atoms together and all the other stuff that happens. The magnetism, everything gets weaker and everything falls apart. A kind of generative universe that never stops generating and pushing matter outward in a spherical pattern. So now you're just creating bent space in reverse, some regurgitating well from the center, that's just pushing matter out into the universe, and collecting it at the end and pushing it back into the drain, and for what? Fine, whatever. Go ahead, I don't care. Think a big stinky, skanky cigar smoking frog invented it all. I don't care, but it's just I just don't see the point. Galaxy would be formed naturally as matter moves outward from the dense central region at the center of the basketball, because, as you said, more space would be added between things as they moved outward. The extra space eventually fragments and breaks apart dense clouds of matter, which become galaxies. Well, at least we agree that galaxies would appear to be expanding, not contracting, which becomes gases, explaining why galaxies are typically separated from one another. Their separation, I think, might be another symptom of the fact that they are expanding, yes. And the same fragmentation or deconstruction process happens locally inside these galaxies, forming, well, it's not the same process, it's exactly the opposite. The solar systems are created by the opposite effect, where a piece of the fragment collects other fragments. Solar systems are consequences of condensed matter exploding. That's why we're made out of star stuff. It's because stars exploded and the pieces recollected. So you can't really include those processes, because those processes are after effects. They're not. The galaxy thing is part of your explanation of the expansion. The solar systems and planets is a sub-feature. It's a byproduct, not a function of the initial expansion. In this thought experiment, galaxies would eventually break apart and dissolve when they get far enough from the center of the basketball. I don't know about the dissolving part, but new galaxies would be formed behind them and in a never-ending process. Well, it says you couldn't, the ones further out wouldn't reconsolidate into galaxies by any mechanical cause, so I don't know if that would work. Do you think this model of the universe conflicts with any observations so far? Well, we don't really have observations that count for anything because we don't have a time scale big enough to watch enough process. So we can only piece it together from what stage we think something's in when we look at it. Different things are in. So, yeah, that one's a little tough. The death of a galaxy is, whether it converts back into a black hole is a good question. And whether that black hole then collects matter, but it couldn't do it if it's expanding. So there has to be a point where the process, like I said, if you do enough expanding, then the atoms all fall apart. So the point where the process can't repeat. You mentioned the speed of light as likely being consistent and accounting for the longer time it takes to travel through the dense mediums like glass and water, because the light takes a longer path. Well, like I said, that's established theory. Obstructed by particles. Well, it's not really obstructed. I mean, obviously the transparent objects, the obstruction is a pathway. So, you know, it's hard to call it an obstruction when the pathway allows you to have exactly the same thing pop out the other side. It's not exactly the definition of an obstruction when you push it in one side and it comes out exactly the right way on the other side, except it's a little bit slowed down. What about light that has been almost completely stopped when aimed at a Bose-Einstein condensate? Completely stopped? I don't think it's ever been completely stopped, so that's just silly. Do you think the speed of light would be faster moving outside our galaxy? I think, again, the speed of light is the speed of distance. Can't change that. So I don't think the time it takes for a photon to travel distance ever changes. Okay, and the only way you can change it is force it through a medium where it travels more distance. So I guess you're not understanding what's obstructing light is more road. It has to travel the detour. It's a longer road. Light isn't slowed down in any way. It just takes longer because it has to travel more distance. Okay. Then inside a galaxy, for the same reason, it moves faster through air than water. Faster outside of our galaxy in a less dense space. So again, this less dense space. There's no point in saying the word space. If you're talking about an ether, say ether. You know, I don't know why, you know, you people are so comfortable taking the word space and turning it into this presumption of whatever's in your imagination. And people can imagine anything. So you have this catch-all now that's space, and it doesn't mean empty space. Space somehow now means, yes, it has to be something space. And you can make it anything. You know, ethers, rivers, liquids. I'm just saying, you got to have a little bit of respect for the word space here. And we say, well, you know, language is just totally broken if I'm not allowed to imagine space as being nothing, not something, nothing. Space is the nothing between somethings. Uh, but yeah, I just don't, again, I don't know why these kind of questions intrigue people, because they just don't do anything for me at all. Because first, like I said, I kind of know you're not going to get answers. So it really doesn't matter. And either way it is, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't change any of the important questions. So I just can't see it as being compelling to even waste much brain time contemplating, how big is big. It doesn't matter. Anyway. Alright, so I think that's enough. I think that's all there was that requires my attention, I believe. Let's see. Okay. Yes, I think that's it. Yeah. So, till the next time. I probably should start doing some subject videos, so these idiots can be directed to those subject videos and such. But see what I get to. See how things go. So, till next time.